Okay, guys, now we behave. The chat is behaving surprisingly well. First time there's actually a sane person on this stream. Nice to see. That's quite accurate, actually. Who are you? Maybe you can.
Who am I? I'm Doug Lyle. I'm a psychologist, and I wasn't my first choice. You know, wanted to be an artist and should have been one, but my father refused to give me the emotional support and the financial support that my talent so richly deserved. So I got stuck doing this psychology thing. But what I'm here to do is to try to figure out how human beings work and how it is that we can help them work better. And so that took me, from an undergraduate in California, and it took me to a PhD at the University of Virginia, and then I became a professor at Stanford University. And then after that, I left academia and went into private practice, where it was all about trying to actually figure out how to help real life people with the best tools and best knowledge that we have. And so that turned out to be, I happened to be very fortunate that right as I was leaving academia, a new idea was born in social science and in particular in psychology, and that idea is called evolutionary psychology. So it's the notion that human beings are actually just an extremely sophisticated and fancy animal, and that if you look at the way they behave, there is actually patterns to it. There's a system to how it works. That system was not understood in psychology for the 20th century, for basically the entire 20th century. It wasn't until the early 1990s, when I was a young man, where this idea was born. And so not very many people understand the idea. A few people have heard it, but it's actually extraordinarily sophisticated. It's essentially the equivalent of modern chemistry with a periodic table, and everybody that doesn't know that is basically pre-periodic table. So that's where we are. And so Monarch, Ossi here, has came to me and started asking me some questions about this because he was intrigued with it. And over the last couple of years, we've gotten to know each other and explored many interesting things through his sort of interesting life and fascinating organization about how it is that we might use my understanding of how humans really work and trying to make everything more fun, more enjoyable, and just more satisfying for everybody. So that's who I am and what I'm about.
Well, first of all, somebody asking, hello psychologist, how does it feel like to be a psychologist of Monarch? That's one interesting one, but also, hello psychologist, do you think Monarch has some type of disabilities? And they're asking just about my conditions and my diagnosis in general. Yeah. What is wrong with Ossi, they are saying. So, yeah.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
Spill the beans, I guess.
Yeah, well, if we were going to answer that, it's well known in the circles that know me that you better ask the question first, because once you ask it, that's it. There's one question where we integrate everything into it. So we're going to do a little bit about that with that question about what's wrong with Ossi. What this is it's actually, the big question is the nature of personality. Like, what do we mean by personality? And in the early 20th century, when they spoke of Freud's personality theory or Jung's personality theory, they didn't even really have it delineated what on earth they were talking about. So I'm going to explain it, that there's two huge parts of psychology. One of them is going to be what we call general psychology, and the other is going to be what we call personality. So general psychology would be the equivalent of, in medicine, Gray's Anatomy. Like every single person, you got male and female, two types of architecture of the human body, and then but if you study the kidney in India, you can operate on anybody in the world because it's the same Gray's Anatomy everywhere. The same thing is true of human psychology. So you've got two basic psychologies, male and female, both human. They're extremely similar with some important differences because of their gender. However, past that point, just because you know how the kidney works basically doesn't mean you know how to operate on a kidney. You don't know how to fix a kidney when it's wrong. In other words, the individual differences in kidneys are unbelievably important. That's where medicine really starts, is at individual differences. And that's what in psychology we call personality. So personality is the entire study of individual differences. It's not nearly as complicated as psychology in general. Psychology in general is like the earth. There are incredible amounts of nuances. Why does a little kid feed its mother or its friends a blueberry? Like, why does a child do that? It's the only species on earth where a child does anything like that. Why do kids run around and scream on playgrounds when they're 8 or 9 years old, but they won't be doing that when they're 12 or 13 or 14? Answer, that's deep evolutionary questions and answers about why human beings are so complicated the way they are. However, the question of individual differences is much simpler, although fascinating. So it's what I call the moon.
I need to understand. I need to interrupt for a second.
Yeah.
I think this is a very fascinating social experiment. This entire stream,
Yeah.
and this is going to be quite challenging because I think my chat is pretty retarded. I wonder like how do we might need to like. Alter the language a little bit too. We gonna need to simplify some concepts.
Sure.
I think the way how you started explaining is like very abstract and maybe too high level and maybe too long. We might need to you need to.
I'm used to it.
Maybe soon you will start to understand my audience better. But do understand that these people they're like gamblers.
Sure.
They're like gamblers from the internet. So
Yes.
They are literally retarded. So
we're going to get there. So what we're going to do is I hear you.
I want to say for the chat that this guy is a fucking genius. He's probably the smartest person that I know, and he has a just insane level of information. But I want to see, this is a little experiment. I want to see if we can actually convey some of that information to you retards, and if you can actually have some like interesting interactions here. But yeah.
We'll try it. I hear you, Ossi. I'll try not to run too wide. So the notion, though, is that you've got individual differences in people, and those individual differences are incredibly important. They can be pretty small. In other words, if you're a Martian biologist looking at two people, you'd say, well, they're people. They're really, really similar. They do very similar things. But if you're a human and you look at two people, they can be vastly different because we're really sensitive to the individual differences. And so so that's what personality is. So the question, somebody said, what's Ossi like? How is he unusual? And the answer is he's very unusual. And there's actually 6 major ingredients to the human personality. So it's like if you were baking a cake and there were 6 ingredients, it doesn't seem like it's very complicated. But it actually is pretty complicated. In other words, all the different amounts of the ingredients can make a whole lot of different cakes out of just 6 ingredients. And so that's how you wind up with all of the different people on Earth, 7 or 8 billion of them. No two of them are actually even extremely similar, not unless they're identical twins. And if they're identical twins, they are actually very similar. But any other two people, even if you have a couple of friends and they seem like a lot alike, they're actually quite a bit different, and they're quite a bit different. So it's going to turn out that we can actually map those differences between people with basically 6 ideas. And those 6 ideas are, well, I'll just talk about a few of them. How open people are to experience. So that's sort of how adventurous they are, how wild they are. This people that are here, that are into the gambling scene, you guys are actually very open to experience. You're not normal people. You're kind of freaks, okay? So these are the kinds of people, this is actually, interestingly enough, even though it's seen as sort of a niche thing in human life, gambling, it's actually not. It's actually the fundamental nature of all animal life is gambling. So what animals do is they gamble time and energy and risk of their lives in order to get more resources or to get mates. That's what they do. In fact, what the brain is, which we now understand, which we never understood before, it's basically a gambling machine. And each gambling machine is a little bit different. So if you're a tiger in the woods, you've got a tiger's gambling machine. And if you're a twig snap, all you feel is, hey, that might be food.
So,
yeah.
Basically, life is actually all about gambling.
That's all it is.
Like human, we are genuinely gambling machines.
Yes.
But
yeah.
What actually hurts my soul is to see like what the gambling has evolved to,
mm-hmm.
like from how we went from the jungle into the fucking slots. I fucking hate the slots.
Yes. The gambling itself, modern gambling, has some super interesting features to it that are essentially the reason that it draws people in is because it pulls on natural desire for adventure and essentially willing to gamble. When you think about it, any guy that ever grabbed a spear and hunted, which means all of our ancestors, what they did was they took risks. They went out there and actually risked their lives in order to feed their families, feed their tribe, feed themselves. And it was dangerous as all get out to do that. And so now that very same desire for some of that adrenaline in order to run those risks, one of the places that people seek that is in gambling. And it's so it's really core in human nature to do that. So obviously, it can get out of control and some people can get into serious problems with it, but most people actually don't. Most people, it's kind of like, there's a sense of adventure in it that is actually speaks to them. Particularly the people that are more open to experience. This is people differ. There's going to be some little guy right now he's 30 years old and he lives in a podunk town somewhere in Iowa, and that guy will never leave that town, and he'll date one girl, and he'll work at the library, and he'll get a gold watch 40 years from now. He will have never taken any adventure, never taken any risks. That's way down there on one end of the scale. On the other end of the scale, there's guys that are the guy that did free solo or something, or climb some rock in Yosemite without a net or whatever the heck he was, or people that want to gamble big stakes, or people that want to do race car driving. This is on the other end of the scale. These are people that are willing to go to tremendous risks for the adventure. Most people are in the middle. Okay, so that's what most people's lives are: moderate risk, moderate reward. That's what they do. But you're going to find in the upper half of this distribution is where you're going to get people that want to do things that are more exciting. They're going to want to gamble money. They're going to want to be sometimes involved in sports. Sometimes they want to start a business. They're the guys that are more bold than I am. That'll go up to the blonde in the bar and hit on her. I've never done that in my life. But this is what starts happening on this other half of the distribution. And so Ossi certainly has that in his blood, and that's been one of the things that has made his life a very fascinating and interesting life, is his willingness to take risks. And that people like that are inherently super interesting people. Sometimes they die because they take a risk too big. Sometimes they discover unbelievable things as a result of taking those risks. So that's characteristic number one, is called openness to experience, and that's a big important thing that everybody that's watching this chat can know. That's part of who you are, is you're probably one notch more open than an awful lot of your friends.
How close are narcissism and psychopathy, and which one am I more?
You mean you, Ossi?
Yes.
Okay. Not close to either. So, but narcissism and psychopathy are actually pretty darn close to each other. So, but they're not the same thing. So, the two ingredients that are important in there are how disagreeable people are, and so people that are very, very disagreeable are narcissistic. They basically won't agree with any deal that you pitch them. It's not good enough. Okay, so Ossi actually is very much a deal maker. So but he's tough, and so he's on the disagreeable side of the spectrum, but he's nowhere near anything that anybody would ever call a narcissist. A psychopath is someone who has extremely little empathy. So they're not resonating to other people's feelings. It doesn't reach them. Ossi isn't anything close to that. So right here, you're going to see in his house, you're going to see dogs, and you're going to see people, and you're going to see smiles and people laughing. You're going to see all kinds of natural empathy.
Have you you never see me whipping people?
This is a very interesting guy with a lot of imagination, and he's also willing to push the envelope to make people uncomfortable, to learn things and make things interesting. So, but that's a vastly long ways away from. I'm somebody that's actually worked with some of the most notorious criminals in United States history. So, I've worked in maximum security prisons with people that you actually know about the murder cases. I'm not going to talk about those now. But I've met those people, and those people will make your blood run cold just looking them in the eye from 2 feet away. So this is not this guy. This guy's adventurous. He's a swashbuckling, a little bit dangerous, gutsy, and a bit unpredictable. And so these are all characteristics of people that do big, dangerous, interesting things. That's how they are.
Well, I wanted to ask, how does a childhood like Ossi's running a business at like 13, 14 and making hundreds of thousands affect you going into adulthood compared to someone that's lived a normal childhood, kind of worked at a corner store? It's completely different, right?
There's differences. There's things you have to go through and learn. There are young people that suddenly things change for them very quickly early. So child actors that become famous, and that can sort of disrupt their development. And so some things happen too soon, and then there are other things have to catch up later. So things can get out of sync. So this is always going to be the case. You have superstars that become famous early, like Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods at 19 the world was at his feet. And so then you see sort of a struggle as they become adults. They have their arc of development is somewhat different. So they get there, you know what I mean? They catch up, but it's kind of like having something that's out of sync or some kind of a like you're kind of out of sync when the gears are slipping on your 10 speed, you know what I mean? And they haven't caught yet. So there's things that will get out of sync when things in development happen at very, very different speeds. So yeah, I think that Ossis definitely has gone through that process as pretty much. I don't recall that I ever saw a case where I had somebody like that didn't have some things get out of balance for a while. That's just kind of the nature of how that works.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes they never get back in balance. You know what I mean? So, but that's not true in this case.
Ossi was a quiet kid. Now he has money. Is very loud. Is there a connection?
I would say another important of those characteristics is sort of how introverted and extroverted people are. And so there's going to be people that, like I said, are going to work in a library their whole life, and they're going to have the same 2 friends, and their birthday party is going to have 5 people in it, and that's who they are. And there's going to be people on the other side that are going to walk into any party in the world, and they don't know anybody there. And by the time they're done, they've got like 30 friends. So that's just huge individual differences in people. And Ossi's in the middle. So Ossi, like a lot of people, most of us are somewhat in the middle in our own way. So he absolutely likes to get out on an adventure and meet new people, but then he also has his time when he needs to be reclusive and just be in his own head. And this is natural, to most people. So it goes back and forth, and like most people, there's like a group or a pack or a posse that he likes to hang with. There's people that he really enjoys, and he likes doing some crazy, wild, halfway dangerous, maybe more than halfway dangerous sometimes. There's things he likes to do, just like a young man on the Kalahari Desert 300,000 years ago with his spear and his best friends. They're not out there to be nice and ring doorbells and sell Girl Scout cookies. That's not what they're there to do. They're there to do some badass stuff and try to basically earn their stripes in the world as men. And that's what I see around here.
Why do you also need a psychologist? I don't think I need a psychologist, but I do think I need him. I think psychologists in general, my humble opinion is that they are scammers, and they rarely know their shit. And I've spoken to many just seeking for information basically, but I don't think that anybody would be. Well, we've discussed about this. I don't think that I can find anybody who is just smart enough really to understand. But when I met Duke Lyle, I just think that he's a person who's, out of all the people that I know, out of all the people in the world, to be honest, I think that he's closest to what I would call the real truth of just humanity and psychology in general. He's just close to the truth about how human work and how just basically how the world works. So this is why I've spent insane amounts of time just consulting him and just trying to learn as much as I can, and it's completely changed my worldview. Like we've known each other for like 1 year ish, and I have to say he red pilled the shit out of me. That's the most simple way I can put it. He's gonna seem very contained and very I don't know how to explain it, but I think the people around me have seen that I have massively changed from the highly red pilling information that I received. So now I'm just trying to like dig deeper and deeper.
Yeah, it's good to follow up on that question. It's like people don't need a psychologist. What they need is information. And so that information could come from Joe the bartender, could come from their mother, could come from their best friend, could come from a teacher, could come from all kinds of places, could come from a book. And hopefully a psychologist or counselor or lawyer or anybody that knows their craft on something important, or a doctor, whatever your question is, hopefully they actually know something. And so I think, so many questions of psychology and human life and so forth are complicated enough and they're subtle enough that psychology itself as a field is halfway in the dark, and they're sort of feeling their way. And so some of us have a better roadmap than others. Some of us have been a little bit better educated. I've been really fortunate that nothing really special about me. What was special about my education was at the time that I was becoming a young man, a revolution took place in my field, and I happened to be there to see it. And as a result of that, I learned a lot about the truth, what Ossi's talking about the truth about human nature. That truth is not known by a lot of my colleagues, and it was completely unknown to humanity before 1990. And so those truths are super useful, and those truths, Ossi gets, people get tired of hearing me talk about this, that they're going to keep hearing the word Kalahari, Kalahari, Kalahari. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about that's where we came from. We came from the Kalahari Desert in Africa 300,000 years ago. And who we are, as men, we're warriors, we're gamblers, we are risk takers. And it's our job to defend our tribe, to make really good close friends, to be honest and straight with our dealing, to gamble with each other and test each other's mettle, to show off for the women. The better looking they are, the more stress it is. Like, this is it. This is human nature. And that perspective of understanding that that's where we came from, that perspective is entirely missing from the social sciences, the 20th century, and it's only recently begun to be informed by the theory of evolution. So that's why Ossi's found it interesting to talk to me. I've been super interested to talk to him and his people and his organization and what you do, because it's all about, i.e., gambling. It's about the core of human nature, and what it means to be alive as an animal is taking chances and trying to win. And that's an old saying is that the next best thing to playing and winning is playing and losing. In other words, it's to play. And a famous lecturer, Mr. Ian James Groen in California in the 1970s and 80s had a beautiful closing, and he said, at the end of this life, when you look back on it, you want it to show your runs, your hits, your errors, the times you did great things and the times you struck out, but don't let it show you haven't played. How would you explain that? Okay, and so that's kind of what Ossi and his guys are guys that want to play. They didn't take desk jobs. They didn't take easy ways out. And if they have to do that, then they're going to be doing other things too. They're going to be trying to add spice to life. Those are, if people are more conservative, that's fine. But you're on the other half of the graph. If you're on this half of the graph, you're somebody that wants to swim where it's a little bit deep.
I'm gonna be able to write. And
what are the kind of similarities between compulsive gambling and compulsive drug taking, for example?
Yeah. What's going to there are similarities, and of course, probably most of you know and have heard that the way that the human being works is it works on dopamine, or that it's a major feedback mechanism to tell you when you are getting ahead. So literally, hot-looking boy or girl walks by, and it literally, even looking at a hot girl walks by, average guy is going to have a dopamine hit in their head just looking. The dopamine is a mechanism that tells you you're getting closer to something valuable for your survival reproduction, which is what you are. You're a survival reproduction gambling machine. And so the drugs can artificially stoke that thing and say that you're winning. That's what makes them potentially dangerous. It also what makes them exciting and fun. And so people that tend to be more open and more adventurous tend to get into that kind of thing because they're willing to take the risks of doing that. Those of us that are like me, that we just soon spend our whole lives in the library and have 3 friends at our birthday party when we're 70. Those of us like that don't do those things. So, but those are individual differences in sort of the risk of how it is that someone operates their own nervous system, which is their life. Compulsive gambling is a problem because essentially what's happening is that that person is highly reactive to the dopamine surge that comes from winning, or more importantly, and this is super interesting about the nature of the individual personalities in gambling, if you almost win. So it's going to turn out, that's a dog psychology, defend the tribe. Okay, that's what that is. So what's going to happen is most people, including the great majority of people that are watching this, that are interested in gambling and like to do it and find it fun recreation.
Niga, how many times have I told you?
The dog's literally leaving the room. It knows what's going on.
Bring it here. Here. Give me.
Dog's gonna hold it together. There we go. All right, little fellow. So one of the individual differences in people that's substantial is what happens when you almost win. So you're designed by nature. See, this guy doesn't want to listen to me any more than most people want to listen. This is that's like very similar to my lady friend. It's like, quiet already. We've heard enough out of you.
I also hate women.
So the issue is that most people are excited if they almost win, but they also feel a significant disappointment, and so it's essentially a learning check that, wait a minute, oops, not quite. You weren't quite good enough. Gambling is mimicking really hunting. And so it's a substantial risk, and we almost won, and therefore it's important that we almost won because we may have learned something important about winning by almost winning. And so that's it's essentially a feeling of skill development, particularly in skill games like poker, for example. Super important to almost win because you're learning how to get better at the problem. And so gambling will mimic that, but many people will actually code almost winning as winning. And you can actually tell this by watching them do gambling during an MRI. So if you actually do or a PET scan of the brain while people are gambling, you can actually study this. And there's a small percentage of people that literally, when they lose but almost win, their brain is indistinguishable from when they win, that's not me. You know what I mean? If I lose $25, it's like, oh, like I feel it. You know what I mean? So if you're someone that feels the disappointment and frustration of a loss, you're probably going to be safe around gambling. If you're someone who doesn't, that's the personality type, which is rare but dangerous. Just like everything. I've had clients that have used every drug under the sun and got addicted to none of them, and I've had people that had one line of cocaine and it wrecked their life. So these are the individual differences in biology that are, not well mapped out yet. Someday neuroscience is going to be able to tell somebody, listen, these are the 5 things you better never do, because this is how your brain's configured. But we don't have that now, so people find out from sometimes hard experience and brutal experience what their addictive process is, and that appears to be core to the problem of gambling. Is effectively, it's kind of interesting to think about what this is. It's sometimes an irrepressible optimism. In other words, effectively, yeah, I didn't really lose, okay? And it's like, uh-oh, if that's you, then that's a problem. So, yeah. So I've treated this problem, and there's there's only one way I know to do it. Yeah, someone is saying that's why slot providers intentionally make things close. That's exactly why. How to contain feelings of rage. Huh. Well, the best way to contain feeling of rage is to get out of situations where you're incredibly vulnerable and angry that someone is taking advantage of you. That's by far the best way we do that.
Do slot providers have psychologists helping them design slots? I'll give my theory. I think that they have quite a few psychologists behind it, but mostly I believe that they are using like fuck tons of data and just like automatic testing, and they developed systems that they found the answers to how to make optimal slots, but whoever psychologists they have working on this, I think that they probably don't understand it. They don't understand the psychology that deeply. I have a feeling you would actually crush them in terms of like knowledge, and you could help them to to find these solutions, which they already found through just from having huge amounts of data and from using like automatic optimization methods. But I'm saying that they found a way to optimize it, but without truly understanding why certain decisions were made. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think you're very accurate. They started out, actually psychologists were involved early in the game in Las Vegas, and there was super important discoveries that were made in learning theory mostly at Harvard University by B.F. Skinner in the 1940s and 50s. And so they figured out actually how to cause persistent activity in an animal, and basically have an animal persist in the face of defeat. And these became known as the laws of learning, and they were absolutely implemented in gambling, in particular in slots. So, but in all gambling, but specifically slots. However, but it's exactly as Ossi is saying. So since that time, there's been so much data and so much incentive to actually incentivize this that every possible experiment has probably been run or pretty close to it. And as a result, the data itself triangulated on optimal solutions, and that is including now what I would essentially call cheating. In other words, by seeding people better as they early, basically giving them artificial positive rates of return in order to pull the organism in. And I think you're absolutely right. At this point, there's not a lot of need for a psychologist in the game, because remember what I said about psychologists, all we're talking about is information here, people. Psychologists don't have any natural secret sauce, no natural insight into anything. All they hopefully have is information, and that information is now being developed and coalesced and essentially consolidated by big data, a whole lot of it.
Relationship, money, and value.
About Monarch's relationship with money and value. I don't know about Ossi. This is getting wide and complicated. The most important thing in life is going to be what we call esteem. That's how human beings are built. You're built for the Kalahari Desert in Africa, where there's 30 or 40 people around you, and there's nothing else that's out there in the world that's going to help you survive. And the people around you are the most important things there are in the world. And so there's threats out there, there's opportunities, there's wildebeest to kill, and there's lions to avoid, and snakes. But what you care about are these 40 people. And within those 40 people, there's like 5 or 10 that are unbelievably important. They're family, they're your mates, they're your best friends. And so money is useful for trade and to get material stuff and to show off and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's not that material wealth that human beings have created isn't useful. It is. But the most important thing, the most valuable thing in life is your relationships with people. And, I know this guy well enough to know that he knows that as well as all you know it. In other words, it's the most important thing to him are the people that are important to him. And that's exactly as it should be, and there's nothing there that's out of balance. Some tips and behaviors that we can train to control gambling. Chasing losses. Okay. Yeah.
Can I say
go ahead.
what I think? How would you solve addiction in general?
Yeah.
Is if you just understand the game. If you just have all the information. If you know how harmful some sort of an action is, just when you get the data somehow into your brain, I think that is the cure to addiction. Like as an example, I used to smoke cigarettes sometimes, but I remember that the moment when you actually told me you helped to actually quantify the damages of cigarettes.
Yeah.
That's when it actually clicked for me, like how harmful it actually is. And now I haven't smoked a single cigarette since, because the cost benefit analysis in my head, it just says that this is super minus EV.
Yeah.
And I think that is just that's like a core piece of like a cure for addiction. And I think the same thing applies to gambling. Like even though I'm a big dopamine seeker, I'm a big dopamine addict. It's interesting to see that despite like all the degenerate dopamine seeking activities that I do, I never really got hooked on like traditional gambling, or like I would never go and gamble my money on roulette or something like that, simply because I know it inside and out. I understand how the maths work, and I understand the house edge, how huge it is. Like just a normal roulette that has, what is it, like 2.7% house edge. Normal, like the average person who plays roulette, and they, even if they know the concept of like there's the zero, there is the house edge, they might think that it's a small thing, but they do not actually understand the maths behind it, like how hard it actually fucks you over, and how it's 2.7% house edge might sound low, but it's actually, this skews it to a point where like probably around 90% of roulette players are losing. It's 90%. It's not 97-3, but it's more like 10-90. It's terrible odds. When you know this, when you understand this, I think then you don't really gamble. But myself, like, I think I've still been addicted to like some forms of gambling. Like the only sports where I think that I'm kind of like addicted to gambling is something like, for an example, poker, where I have like an opponent where it's not actually clear. I don't have the full information. I don't actually know if I'm plus EV or minus EV, and that completely changes the dynamic when you don't have the full information. But yeah, I think just full information is the key. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. But you can.
Important components. Depending upon what some other people face, I'll explain this briefly about how it is that Ossi's not talking actually about any kind of an addictive process. As he's reporting, he doesn't seem to have that kind of, it doesn't have an addictive personality. There are people that have very addictive personalities, and there's people that actually don't have addictive personalities, but they have specific weaknesses about a specific chemical or process. And they can be just particularly highly rewarded by some kind of stimuli that can put a hook in their mouth. Pretty much any of those stimuli they work because the neurochemistry of that process actually is essentially hyperactivating that area in that particular person. So there are people that will get addicted to a specific gambling game or gambling in general. And like I said, those are they're a small percentage of the population. Las Vegas knows that they are an incredibly lucrative member of the population for them. But they are, so this is not just fun. This isn't just going out with our buddies and trying to kill the wildebeest. This is actually getting too dangerous. And so but what do you do if you have that kind of a situation? And what you do is you have to understand just a little bit about what's happening. And that is that all gambling is doing is the attempt to acquire a resource. And this is what actually is the core of all action of all animal life. So a mosquito is buzzing around your ear, it wants your blood. Okay, that's what it's doing. And so when a gambler is gambling, they're just trying to get resources. And somebody said, what about chasing losses? Yeah, that's like a cat that grabbed a mouse, and then the mouse got away and it ran under the refrigerator. And that cat is like, you know what? I'm staying right here until I get that freaking mouse because I know it's there. And that's a feeling that you can have when you put a bunch of money in a slot machine or you've lost a bunch of money at a table and you're like, you know, that money's there, by God, and it can be had. I can somehow get it back. And so that's a persevering, you know, that's not anything psycho about a person that's doing that. That's an incredibly reasonable animal instinct that says that resource still exists and I'm not too far away from it. And if I put more effort out, I can get it back. Okay? This is a really nasty trap for some people. And so, as Ossi is trying to say, more information informs the mind and puts it in a position to make a better decision. And so what I do with people that are basically hyper dopamine responders to gambling situations is I have to explain to them, now this is one of these unfortunate things where you guys got to listen to me for a couple of minutes while I tell a story. Sorry, okay? But think about if you lived in a land that every spring there was peaches that would come ripe. And so you would know that they're ripe and you'd go down there and you'd get them. And then you hike back home. You know, the bears live down there, so you don't want to live down there. But you go down there and you get the peaches. You hike back home, and everybody in the village is really happy. It's like, man, that's fantastic. The peaches are in season. And so then, you know, a few days later, you know you picked all the ripe ones out, but you go back, you get some more, you bring them home. And you keep doing this for several weeks. And then finally, you go out there one day, and there's no more peaches left in the tree. And you come back and you tell everybody, that's it, they're out of season. And like people are thinking, yeah, but we're thinking about those peaches. And the reason you're supposed to be still thinking about those peaches is you recently had the resource. Because you recently had the resource, your evolutionary psychology believes that the resource is still available. Okay? So it absolutely thinks that resource is still available. And the brain is scheming to get that resource. It's thinking about that resource. It's fantasizing about that resource. It absolutely believes that resource is still available. So somebody in that village is going to hike down to where the bears are again, and it's going to check out every tree, and it's going to come back and it's going to say, frickin' no more peaches. People are still going to be thinking about those peaches for the next 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. But if we check into their brains 2 months from now, we're going to find out that they're not thinking about those peaches. Once in a while, they may have a quick thought about the peach, but pretty much they're not thinking about those peaches at all. This is what I call going out of season, okay? People have had all kinds of theories about addiction, 1,000 of them. Your early childhood, you got beat up by your brother, your aunt was weird and yelled at your mother at the wrong time, the toilet seat was up or down at the wrong time, you know, whatever. It's all wrong. All this is, there's nothing pathological about this. This is just an animal seeking a resource. It's a resource that's tricky, so you've been kind of set up to believe something that isn't true. But the bottom line is that this is just a creature seeking a resource. And the problem is that that resource is flashy and enticing enough and been brilliantly engineered enough to happen to lure in your nervous system. And your nervous system is not a nervous system that takes no for an answer very easily. You're one of those people that can't just let it go. Okay, and just say, I'm burned. That's it. That's all. You got my $100. That's all you're getting. No. You've got a perseverating psychology that's like, no, I'm not taking no for an answer. Okay? People will tell you that's something wrong with you. That's nothing wrong with you. That's actually a feature of a personality with perseverance. Okay? The problem is if it's misapplied in this particular situation, it's a trap. And so what I tell people is your only hope is to take this out of season. You've got to take it out of season. And that means 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 days isn't going to be enough because your nervous system is going to know that resource is still in season. Okay? If any of you know, and anybody that's asking this question, you've ever known anybody that was ever addicted to anything. So you've got an uncle that had an alcohol problem, whatever. You'll know that there's people that can go 30 years and they haven't had a drink in 30 years. Their life is a wreck 30 years ago. But today, they're 74 years old and they're completely sober. And it's no longer a problem for them. Why? Not because they're superhuman. They did not do the superhuman thing for 34 years. They didn't do that. Okay, what they did was for a period of time, they took it out of season. And once they took it out of season, that solved the problem. Okay, so that is how we do this. So if you particularly have a problem with gambling, your move on the chessboard is to take it out of season. Get away from it for long enough that the brain quits rattling and trying to motivate you to go seek it. That is not a pathological condition. That does not mean you're sick. It doesn't mean there's anything in the world wrong with you. It means that you're a highly optimistic individual with a big-time perseverating chip that has been actually attracted by something that is very fancy and shiny, and you're not willing to let it go. You have to let it go for long enough to take it out of season to where it goes quiet. And that's how we solve that problem.
How dangerous do you think this is actually for me, like physically, like my work, which I do, like this thing of like exposing scammers and like actually kind of like hunting them down, and like in particular with someone like specifically like Killian's case. I'm curious about like what do you think about the psychology of somebody like Killian or some of these other enemies, but like specifically Killian in this case. What is the threshold for like a person like this? How easily will like a human being actually like kill someone or like send a hitman on them? Like in this case where like somebody is just like really fucking with their business, or specifically with Killian, considering that like I don't even know like the extent, like how far I went with it, but like what I did to Killian, I would say that I went like super far with like my sort of like psychological torture, and I made it like super personal in a way. Like I think I did some pretty fucking, it's kind of like insane shit that I did to him. Like I think that he really got hurt super badly from it, and but alongside this, obviously I basically destroyed his business. I destroyed his reputation, and I also there are legal risks that come to him. But I'm just wondering, like, what are the chances that he's already like paid someone to like come after me, or what's the chance that he will do that?
Well, I don't know him. This gets to be a question of personality, but it's always the case that any animal brain on Earth is just running cost-benefit analysis. So Mr. Killian will be running a cost-benefit analysis.
But some people are saying that this is bad. This is a bad thing to say. I should delete the bot because I'm being sued. I'm sorry, courts. I'm sorry. I did the psychological torture. I admit it. I did the horrible thing. I admit it. I sent Sticky Hand to Malta. I sent him in front of your house into the swimming pool. I sent him to scream, "Killian, give my house back." That is the psychological torture I did to him. That's I'm sorry. I'm an evil psychopath. But Your Honor, you weren't even fucking there. So shut the fuck up. And also, I was bowling, so there's nothing illegal there. But yeah.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
In Minecraft.
Yeah, I think it depends upon where you are in the world, but so in the United States, you're defended from saying anything if it's the truth. So, but anyway, what do I think about this? Well, we don't know about the individual psychology of the person. This is like we should
psychoanalyze him deeply sometime on stream. But
this is oops, there we go. This is goes back to what I said at what I said about the beginning was there's two parts of psychology. One of them is the Gray's Anatomy, in other words, how all people work. and the second part is the individual differences between the people. And so all people would be frustrated, angry, defensive, feeling aggressive. In other words, that would be human nature from anyone whose character was publicly under assault from somebody, true or not. In other words, this is still problematic for Mr. Killian in his life. So the question is, what are the individual differences? What is the individual nature of this specific person? And how does he run his risk-reward ratio? Very few people would, many people would imagine wiping somebody out for doing something like that. Hell, I've killed people in my head for a lot less. Okay, so the point is that that's part of human nature. That's part of our Kalahari ancestry. Is somebody insults you, those insults you can imagine how important they would be on the Kalahari. If you insult someone, you could damage their reputation, and there's only 10 women in the village. If they all hear this and there's truth in it, you could actually hurt someone's mate value so substantially that you actually are blocking and impeding their ability to reproduce their DNA, which is exactly what they're here on Earth to do.
I think that is literally what we did to Krim. Like, he is literally, it is impossible for him to reproduce in his life because of certain things. As for Killian, I think he can still reproduce, but he does seem to be quite a mental wreck. But yeah, my opinion about this whole thing is that, like, all of these, like, wars, it's kind of like playing Russian roulette, and that need to be, like, kind of careful with, like, what targets you choose. And I'm lucky that I don't have that many enemies yet, and that the enemies happen to be like internet gamers who don't have too much testosterone in them. But yeah, I know in the business world, how easily some people just kill people. It's and yeah, sometimes I do feel like I've kind of been divinely protected, since I have been so reckless on so many levels, and lucky that nothing happened. But yeah. I guess for, like, each war that I start, for each one of them, I guess I need to add one more big black man between me and my door.
Well, it's one way to live. But yeah, I mean, this is also you with an another characteristic that is part of that picture of personality is going to be how determined you are for the people in the village to act fairly towards one another. And so that happens to be, when people ask anything about Ossi's personality, one of them is high openness, and another one is an extremely strong moral streak about that issue. And so most people can, like, shrug their shoulders and, hey, whatever. And they can be upset about things that they consider unjust, but they're not going to move heaven and earth, and they're not going to put themselves between themselves and a freaking Russian tank. They're just not going to do that. There are people that are willing to essentially do that kind of a thing, and it's dangerous. And yeah, I think you push the limit, and I'm glad you're still breathing. You have a huge life in front of you, and you have to be smart about the cost-benefit analysis. You don't sort of want to, you don't want to push somebody where they don't have anything to lose, and that is they're lines that statistically you'd be wise to respect.
I think somebody like, well, Killian, he's kind of in a corner, but I think that he can still recover this. Like, he can still have an okay life. But somebody like Krim, I don't know what is he gonna do. Like, Krim, he's there inside at his home, depressed as fuck. I think that he has no life ahead of him, and he's sitting on like $10 million. So I don't know when is he gonna just go on, like, school shooter mode.
Well, let's hope somebody that's that wealthy can figure out something productive and uncontroversial and interesting to do in this life, because there's a million things you can do. where you can earn esteem in the right way from people that matter and build some happiness. So
I don't think he has many things to do, really. Like, I don't know what's his next move. Like, he's literally locked in.
Might want to call me.
Actually, holy fuck.
Over the years, in this industry specifically, there's been so many scammers, not only casino owners, but influencers as well. And obviously, they will justify their actions. How much are they convincing themselves that do they actually fully believe that they are the good guys?
Actually, this is a very interesting one. I spoke about this with my team yesterday. I was thinking about this thing out loud. That is there a chance that that Killian actually believes in his mind that he's not a scammer? Is it possible that they have that level of like a cognitive disassociation where they kind of like justify this to themselves somehow? And especially I do think that in Grim's case I know that he's not particularly intelligent and he's not very self-aware, and I think that he might be deep enough in copium that he actually believes that it's not a scam. But yeah, what's your thoughts on this? Because I do think that everybody, like basically everybody in the world, even the worst people, they can scam, they can cheat, they can steal, they can murder, they can do all kinds of things, and they will always believe that they are still the good guy, and they find a way to justify it to themselves.
Yeah, that's this is going to be a natural derivative of humans having evolved in tribes. So there's going to be tribes that have conflicts of interest with other tribes, and most of the time, human beings are inherently actually pretty damn cooperative. So when tribe 1 meets tribe 2, if the leadership isn't frickin' psycho, if they're reasonable, those people will intermingle, and there'll be opportunities for new mates to find each other. That this is a way that genes don't, that you're going to stop inbreeding from taking place and destroying a local gene pool. In other words, you want to be open to meeting new people and have new traits and so forth. But there's a threat that sits under that. And the threat that sits under that is, if we're clever, we might be able to take advantage of the other tribe. We might be able to deceive them, be deceptive, or we may be able to force them to getting resources from them. So the problem is that human beings' moral structure is interestingly flexible. In other words, it's basically, if it's pro-tribe, almost anything goes. And so that's why, in an incredible, beautiful documentary done by Steven Spielberg about 15, 20 years ago called Band of Brothers. It's an incredible story of the 101st Airborne in World War II. And it's actually interviewing these old guys as they're getting to be very old men, and talking about their experiences. And I remember one of them saying, really nice guy, saying, gosh, that German guy, he and I could have been friends. Had we been in a different set of circumstances, we could have had so much in common and probably did. But in the middle of that conflict, it's kill or be killed. You know what I mean? That's all there is to it. And so on a smaller and less dramatic scale, the human being can absolutely do that. It's like, hey, this is in tribe, this is family, and you know what? Everybody else can frickin' die, because what counts is us getting as many resources as we can in here. So people, that line is flexible, and a person of extraordinary character is someone who expands that circle, can expand it and expand it and can expand it. And they don't have to be extraordinary, but these are really good people that essentially expand the circle out, and they want everybody treated fairly. Okay, that's all they want. They just want everybody treated fairly. There's a lot of people, a lot of humanities that way, but in there, though, the problem, as you can see in evolution, that sets up the possibility of being a sucker. Okay? So there's going to be somebody in there that's going to be like, yeah, let's treat everybody fairly, and then everybody lowers their guard, and then they get screwed. Okay? So this is why in the village there's always a dynamic tension. We want to treat people fairly, but at the same time we got to be paranoid that somebody isn't going to play that way. And the reason why we got to be paranoid is somebody isn't going to play that way. And so what Ossi's talking about is absolutely deep human nature, that somebody can basically take their circle, not because they're necessarily a bad human, but from our standpoint they are. They can get that circle pretty tight, and it's like anything goes outside the circle, okay? And I don't care how young the kid is, I don't care what the hell the situation is, hey, if it comes in here, you made the trade, and that's a problem.
I would think that we are genetically built to scam from different tribes. Would that be?
You're designed to run a CB on whether or not it's worth scamming. You're pretty sophisticated, but
I'm
yes.
saying that if the tribe is distant enough, if it's far enough, and you know that we don't care about their opinion whatsoever, then we are built to basically steal from them.
You're built to consider it.
Yes.
That's what it is.
But if the stakes are high enough, like I think that almost any of us, even if we would never scam, but if we could scam $10 billion from an absolute alien from another planet who's just there alone, we would probably, even at that point, I would turn into a scammer.
Well said. Yeah, there you go.
Is gambling a bad thing?
Yes. Gambling is an interesting and exciting thing that is tickling an instinct in you, not dissimilar to putting sugar in your iced tea. Okay, so that sugar is a refined product, so it's going to be sweeter than something that you would have gotten on the Kalahari. And believe me, if you go to the Kalahari and you sweeten and you give them some Coca-Cola, they're going to be all happy about this. Okay, and you might say, well, is there anything wrong with that? It's like, well, obviously Coca-Cola isn't the best thing in the world for you, but at the same time, would you have wanted to go through this life and not had some? And so that's how gambling is. In other words, you're going to gamble time, energy, money, risk. You freaking go get a degree in something. You just gambled a bunch of your time and energy that there's going to be some payoff for this somewhere down the road. So gambling is inherent in your life. The notion of playing games, some people are drawn to that more than others. And if you're drawn to that, there's nothing in the world wrong with that. That's not a bad thing to do. The question is, do you lose too much? Is it too expensive for you? And that's something that, I think a lot of people that gamble probably ought to set a limit, whatever it is that is reasonable for them to play with. And I have friends of mine that gamble and they keep track all year long about whether they're winning or losing and how much it is. And they tend to brag to their women when they're winning, and they tend to be real quiet about it when they're losing. But the point is that you got to keep it in a range where the sum total of the experience isn't too expensive for you. Okay? So that's how you look at it. And other than that, it's neither a good or a bad thing. It's whether or not it fits your particular life. That's how you have to look at that. It'd be similar to, let's suppose you're somebody that really liked to box. And it turns out, I had a client that really liked to box. It was a female. And the first time she got gloves on and started hitting, and somebody hit her, she was like, she liked it. She was like, I just like it. It's like, and I'm like, we got to be careful. Make sure you're always wearing headgear. And, this is going to be time limited. You're not going to be doing this forever. And don't be doing it too much, because there's a little micro brain trauma in there, and you don't want to be disabled when you're 65. So she had to manage that. She continued to box, but she boxed very, very carefully, within everything that was known to keep her safe, so she could enjoy her process, because it was exciting and fun for her, but not take it too far. And that's exactly how we have to look at this.
What's the difference between a gambler, like an intelligent gambler that will use or kind of a pseudo-intelligent gambler that will use gambling strategies compared to someone that just degens and is there a big difference between those two types of people? Like you said, your friend that keeps track of all his bets to see if he's in profit or not, compared to someone that will just go crazy. Is there a big difference there?
Yeah, that's almost a different. It's kind of interesting. I haven't thought too much.
Subway Surfers.
I haven't thought too much about that. My friend that keeps track, he's a poker player. Mm-hmm. So this is a game of skill. So he's going through a learning curve. And obviously we know, I don't know, some people might want to argue with me online, but I don't think there's any skill in roulette, and I don't think there's any skill in slots. I mean, these are truly what we call games of chance. Poker is not. Poker is a combination between a game of chance and skill. And so you can understand why it's inherently fascinating. It's like learning how to hunt. So so I think there's big differences, and there's probably many features about what kind of games draw what people, and also what kind of games draw people in general. So slots are unbelievably seductive for people because the feedback is so quick, and what it's doing is it's actually operating on two algorithms that are in people's heads: the variable interval reinforcement schedule and variable ratios. In other words, you don't know when you're going to win and when you're not going to win, and then you don't know how much you're going to win when you win. It's like this causes animal perseveration, whether you're talking about pigeons in an experiment in the basement of the university or you're talking about human beings in front of a slot machine in Vegas. So those things are, if someone's losing a lot of money to slots, they need to wise up, and they need to understand that they've got a hook in their mouth down into human nature, and this is, again though, if you could set limits, there are people that I know that'll set a couple $100 limit on slots, and they'll go to these Indian casinos where it is that I live, and they'll be like, hey, when I've gone through $200 or $300 or whatever it is, I'm done. You know what I'm saying? And once in a while, of course, I always hear about the times when they come back and they've won. And of course, sometimes they do. And so, but it's about whether or not this is actually getting costly and it's starting to infringe on very important in your relationships, for example. Suddenly the family or the girlfriend or the power bill. In other words, these are important things to make sure that we have appropriate limits. Yeah.
Doug, what do you think of tools like, I think it's called like GAMSTOP, that stopped a gambling addict from accessing these sites? Does it actually work, or does it kind of gamify, like turn it into a challenge?
It can help marginally, but no.
I haven't studied in detail. So I've just done this one-on-one with people that I work with, in my office.
Fuck you, Warren. Stop stealing my ideas.
And each person is so different. Their circumstances are so different. And so what we try to do is similar, but essentially we're doing heart surgery on a bunch of people, and every single heart's different, even though there's principles that we use. So I do believe that there is a lot of sort of halfway or three-quarters knowledge in the field that isn't integrated. Nobody that's ever theorized about these things has ever thought about this in terms of human beings, gambling propensities, the Kalahari Desert, individual differences in neurochemistry due to the genetics that drives their individual personalities. They are thinking in very 19th century Freudian terms about you've got some incomplete process with your Oedipus complex from your father or some abuse history that took place when you were 17. They are completely off base. And despite that, those therapists can be halfway decent because they've got experience. And as a result, they are sometimes helpful. But they are not nearly as effective as we could be with humans with better information, which is what I consider all psychology, all teaching, all learning, basically all maneuvering around in life is all about trying to get your information more accurate, enabling you to make better decisions. And that's, anything that you guys did, I'd be happy to be a part of to try to help share what I have done in my practice with this very problem.
We have a talented gambler in the chat. He has gambled for 10 years almost daily, and he never got addicted. Well done.
There you go.
Is gambling addiction exclusive to humans, or can you see similar behavior in other animals?
That is a hell of a question.
Yeah, but I don't know, are you up to date on this idea, but we are very committed on this. He thinks that it's impossible, but I will invest whatever amount of money it takes to prove him wrong.
That's right.
But we want to, with Dual, we will make cruel animal experiments, and we intend to build the first gambling addicted monkey or orangutan.
That's right. I remember this. Well, I remember this conversation. I think it's a great question. In principle, I could see how that could happen, except that animals don't tend to think very far into the future, and so they're not. You can get them superstitious. You can do that, but whether you can get them superstitious in a way that penalizes them, in a way that it penalizes us to actually lose our money, I'm not so sure that you can do that. So
it must be possible. It's so simple. Monkey give banana, monkey press button, monkey get many banana. Or if that doesn't work, monkey give banana, monkey press button, monkey get mad monkey pussy.
He's got an interesting idea there that I don't believe has ever been captured in that arena of science. So I don't know. It's curious. I'll have to think about that. They certainly can be addicted to substances. In other words, so their neurochemistry works incredibly similar to humans. So it works that way. There's reasons why I'm thinking that any gambling, quote, addiction-like thing would be very, very short-lived and would not perseverate. So it wouldn't be somebody. No, they're not going to lose their whole pile of bananas. I don't think that that's going to happen. But it is interesting. Probably you would find the wisps of it, or you probably could demonstrate that to the level that they can conceptualize that they have wealth and that they've lost a little bit of it. But I'm not sure. I don't think anybody's done it. Yeah. But yeah, he wants to show an addicted monkey. Yeah, he told me that. I forgot.
Yeah, I would have thought that's something that's been kind of looked into in the past.
Yeah.
Maybe Joel can look into it.
His brain affected badly by making so much money so young, more than a lot of superstar music. No, I don't think so. In other words, business people that do very well young. This is, it's not easy to be a superstar musician or actor. In other words, you could get thrown in the limelight just because you were lucky, but the truth is you're probably very talented and you're incredibly hardworking and you're lucky. Okay, so Michael Jackson had a phenomenal amount of talent, and so there's a reason why he was a household name by the time he's like 14 years old. Did he have then that sort of out of sync upbringing that never sort of got into sync? And the answer is yes. He had a very tumultuous life because of that. But a lot of people that are successful young as entrepreneurs, it's a little bit different. They have to make an awful lot of decisions very, very well in order to be successful. So you're going to have to be bright. You have to be a gambler. You have to be willing to take chances. And then if you're successful, it's super easy to get overconfident and blow it. Okay, so that's a super common thing with young entrepreneurs. So Ossi hasn't blown it yet. He's still young. He has time. But the point is that you're watching someone that for several years, whose decision making is actually on a general scale, it's excellent. That's why he hasn't blown it. And so has it done him any harm? No, I think it's exactly the same kind of thing that one of our very early questions is that it's made his life arc out of sync, out of gear at times, a little herky-jerky. Things are coming together. I think I hope to live long enough to see him become, a middle-aged guy, and I hope I live that long to see what happens. I'm fascinated with what will happen with this person in the next 20 years. So, but so far so good. Kind of what you'd expect. In other words, trouble, a few missed gears. You know what I mean? Some spin outs, some spectacular victories. That's what we expect out of people with talent and a high tolerance for risk. But certainly no damage.
No damage. And what was the topic?
No, it was i.e. did making a bunch of money early wreck you worse than being a rock star or something?
No, I don't.
And the answer is absolutely not. No.
I think it put me into dangerous situations.
Yeah.
Things could have gone wrong,
Yes.
and I have been divinely protected. But
There you go.
I think I'm calibrated pretty well.
Optimal survival strategy mentally for Ossi and Joe. When gang locks them up. Well, we'll worry about that later.
I think there's a solid chance that I will run a cult later in prison. I feel like I can actually. I do believe there's a good chance that I can pull it off. Like even if I'm there like surrounded by a bunch of like tattooed, darker skinned gentlemen, I do feel like I am pretty good at like playing sort of chess with them. But Occam's razor might say that I'm gonna get raped. But
I've been in there. I know. I've been 10 years in a maximum security prison as a prison psychologist, forensic psychologist. So, the truth of the matter is you'd be fine. It's boring as all hell. Well, that's what people don't know about prison. They're terrified of it.
I wanna get there and just lecture to them about evolutionary psychology.
There you go.
And somehow it's gonna. I just know that all roads in my life they lead to like being a cult lord somehow.
All right. What else we got? One thing that is similar in all criminals that you've talked to in jail. They made a mistake.
I think many of the murderers and stuff they still have like a kind heart, and they are good people that just made mistakes, especially the darker gentlemen who have a lot of testosterone in them. It can just you can spill the black coffee. I think we have one example in the house with us right now. Like we have one convicted murderer, torturer in here, but I think that he's a really kind heart.
He's one of the nicest people.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're the people that are in prison are as widely dispersed as the people that if you walk down the street in New York City, you've got all kinds of people there. You got guys that are gonna wash your windshield for $1, and you got guys that just pulled $100 million scam on Wall Street. So, and everything in between. And so the people that I met in prison some of them were fabulous people. And they were people that did dangerous things, but they did them for reasons that they thought were the right thing. I had one young man that his young sister had been raped. And the guy that did it was bragging about it and basically said, "Hey, I'm going to come after your family." My guy confronted him, and he got nothing but arrogant pushback and threats back, which is incredible. And my guy was no wimp, but he was young. He was 17, and
I would torture and kill in Minecraft in that situation.
Well, what he did was he and his friend basically went to the guy's place to intimidate him. And what they did was they shot through the door. They had no intention of killing the guy. They didn't know the guy was on the other side of the frickin' door. Okay? And so it just so happens that he was on the other side of the door. A bullet got through the door and it killed the guy. So my guy got a life sentence. And when I met this guy, boy, I just remembered his name, but his name was Raul. And I'm meeting him 20 years later. He's like 37 years old. And I actually coached him very carefully through his parole hearing for over a year. And so he had an incredibly clean record in prison. He had gone to work every day, had excellent, this was a guy that had really high character. And, so for 20 years, he keeps getting denied by the parole boards. And, you do that and you start to lose your faith. And you start to almost not care. And I'm like, listen, you have to continue to care. What you've never done is you've never actually done the very best possible job that you could possibly do in front of a parole hearing. So here's what we did. We actually went to a lot of trouble. We got the printouts from his parole hearing. We went through question by question what they asked him. We went through what his answers were, and then we wrote scripts for those answers next time. It wasn't going to be the same people. It's going to be brand new people. They never have the same people twice. So we prepared, and he prepared with his cellie. That's what you call the guy that you live with. You call him your cellie.
Yeah.
When I first heard that, it's like, God, it seems kind of sweet, like my, but it's no. I mean, your cellie, that's what they call him. And so he prepared with a cellie. He had a really good cellie who believed in him. And those two would drill on the yard for a year. And he went into the next parole hearing. And at the end of that hearing, what they said to him was, we're not going to let you out, but we're having a hard time not letting you out, okay? So the parole people don't really have any advantage to let anybody go, because if a guy goes out and then he does something terrible, it looks terrible for you. So the incentives are terrible for parole hearings. They're incredibly conservative. You basically have to walk on water. That guy was devastated. And what I told him is, look at how close you got. This is talking about gambling. You know what I mean? Did you get close? And I'm like, listen, you got really close. Okay? So we go back to the drawing board and do the same thing. We look at every question that was asked, every answer that you had. Where did you miss an opportunity? Where could we have done it a little bit better? He did it again. Next year he went home. Okay? The odds of going home were 1 in 100. So we got that guy home. But the question is, how are all people the same in prison? They are so incredibly different, you can't believe it. There's guys, when you meet them, you're like, oh my God, put your hand over your wallet and get the hell out of here as fast as you can. You know what I mean? You can smell it. There's other guys that are absolutely true blue, really decent guys. And so, you know, in prison, if you're in there, the most important thing you do is find a good cellie. Okay? If you find a good cellie. If your cellie is good, your life is decent. If your cellie is bad news, you got to get the hell out of there, and that becomes the game. Yeah. All right.
Did you meet anyone in death row?
Not death row, but there's something that's different than death row, which is what's called LWOP, or life without parole. So that means you have no chance, and that's a hard one. I have to say that one of the important reasons.
Do they have a chance to be pardoned still?
Yes.
Like how? What's the chance? 1
in a million.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I went to work in the prison was that I got kind of tired of just talking to well-to-do people with well-to-do problems. And so it isn't that I have anything against well-to-do people with well-to-do problems. It's that I felt like my knowledge of human beings and their negotiation of conflicts was being limited by that. And so I wanted to actually face the toughest problems that there were. And I considered an LWOP to be the toughest problem that there is. How do you get happiness in life if you're never going to see the outside of a prison wall? And that was the task. And so, and what myself and other people have come up with is, what you work on is you try to do the best job you can every day at something that's worthwhile. And so you essentially try to earn respect of people on the yard in the right way, not from being the biggest badass, but actually being an upstanding, decent, fair person that's trying to do positive things.
These people can still be happy, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They can. It's certainly handy.
Prison becomes their tribe, essentially.
People in the prison yard become their tribe. That's why the guy that helped my guy get out, he himself was facing another 15 years. But one of the most worthwhile things he ever did was to drill with Raul. And, he actually came and talked to me after Raul was released, and he said, "Thank you so much. I can't believe it." And I said, "Thank you, because without you, that never would have happened, and that guy would have rotted in here for his whole lifetime." Yeah. So there's always something that you can do. And that was one of the messages of Mahatma Gandhi, was that no matter how bleak your situation seems, there's always something that you can do. And being an LWOP is about the toughest thing that there is, but there is something that you can do, and our job was to find what it was that would give that life the most meaning.
Subway Surfers studio.
Oh, shit, yeah, sorry.
Do you know what is Subway Surfers?
No.
This is Subway Surfers. Welcome to the new generation. In order for them to watch this, they need to have this on the screen.
Okay.
Do you get it? Wow.
No.
It's like a super common thing if a story is being told on social media.
Yeah, these people, their attention span is ruined, so they need to have this in there. It makes them it's easier to watch. It's an actual thing.
No, I've seen it all.
Humanity is so fucked.
It works as well, yeah.
Oh, good. All right. What is the biggest regret a man can do?
They're asking if I take antipsychotics and is it worth to take? I take them and it's hell for me. My answer is, fuck no, I don't take, never have taken, and you shouldn't take.
Yeah. Well said. Biggest regret a man can do. Boy, that's such a big bad philosophical question. I would say biggest regret is to do something incredibly self-serving and short-sighted that harms other people. Second would be to not take some risks that were really worth taking, and to sit on the sideline and not play. Okay, so the biggest mistake would be to basically go to the dance and never ask a girl to dance. If that's what you do in this life, that's a regret you don't want to have. You want to take some chances, and as I said before, the next best thing to playing and winning is playing and losing.
Yeah, so Doug, if this is a good question, if there are actually bad people who think they are good, how can a good guy know that he is good, knowing that people can lie to themselves?
Well, these are, like I said, bad and good is defined by effectively tribe, and the people that are pretty nasty and effectively have no tribe, they don't think they're good people. Like, they know, you know what I'm saying? So they don't care. They can't see it any other way because they have such little empathy for their marks that they actually they don't think they're good people. What they think is that we're all a bunch of idiots. They imagine a shark in a goldfish bowl. It's like, why are you guys swimming around me, for God's sakes? I'm going to kill you. And that is what is a true sociopath is basically, what can I get out of you? Can I con you into thinking that you're safe, and then can I take it? And if you're stupid enough to have that happen, they find that entertaining, and they find it incredibly useful. So, but if you ask them, do you think you're a good person? They might give you an answer, but they actually would be looking at you the way a lizard would look at you. They'd be like, the hell are you talking about? What do you mean, good person? You know what I mean? Isn't this all about getting a bite off, biting your hand off if I can? That's all it is out here, and you're all weird. And that's how that works. So other people that you might consider bad are actually just within a tribe and have a very narrow circle, a moral circle about who they think needs to be treated well, and then out tribe is out tribe. The human propensity to actually draw a line of tribe not tribe was discovered to actually take an absolute minimum amount of information by a British social psychologist by the name of Henry Toffel in the late 1960s. And he found that all he had to do is basically divide two people into two groups, like literally, okay, count odd and even, and you guys are on the odd side of the room and you're on the even side of the room, and then have them, and then that's all he had to do. And then basically what they then did was they said, oh, forget about that. Okay, then what they do is they have people do stuff and then watch it, and then watch how do you think how well they did this and how well they did that. And people were totally in group, even though they had never met those people, and the only thing that had happened was that in 1 second they were in that tribe. This tells you that the tribal psychology of humans is deeply instinctual, and it's actually immediate. And those experiments were called, for anybody that wants to look it up for fun and finds it entertaining, it's called minimal groups. And so literally the minimum amount of information necessary is what is capable of forming tribe. So it shows you how important it was to have tribe, because if you're not in the in-group, you're a threat. And if you are in the in-group, you're suddenly safer. So this is a deep instinct in humans.
So does that mean that lonely people have a higher potential of being dangerous?
Super interesting question. I would think in general, no. It'd be different between a lonely person and a completely isolated person. But in general, no. Loneliness is a feeling that is coming as a result of a deep evolutionary calculus that basically says you're unsafe. And so what it's actually driving you to do is to make connections with other people. Okay, so yeah, we think of Ted Kaczynski, you know what I mean? We think of the Unabomber, crazy, but those are very different, unusual people with bizarre things wrong. So yes, the loner kid that's been rejected by everybody. This question is, why are you alone? You know what I mean? What were the processes that led to that? And the answer is, oh, you're a freaking psychopathic nutcase that doesn't have any empathy for your fellow students, and now you're 13 years old and you're like, frickin', I'm going to level the school. It's like, why did that happen? Not because you're lonely, because you're a nut. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's more complicated than that, and people that look at a surface level are going to be looking in the wrong place. Yeah, very, very good question. Yeah.
I think this is kind of a vague one.
Yeah.
But yeah, are there underlying issues like stress, anxiety, depression that might be driving gambling habits?
Well, gambling habits, remember, are native to the organism. So gambling, taking a risk of time and energy and trying to get a prize of resources, that's part of human nature. And so if you are depressed and anxious, or things are not going well in other domains, it makes sense to do something where the payoff might be very, very high for very little effort. So gambling, if you think about what gambling is, it's actually fascinating. It is bringing you face to face with a high risk, high reward without too much effort. So it's basically putting you in front of a wildebeest with a spear. And it's like, you might win and you might lose, but you didn't have to actually run this guy down for 9 miles to get there. You get to get in that moment right now. So when you think about a rate of return on spinning the wheel in roulette and you have almost a 50-50 chance of winning, that's an incredible opportunity. In other words, it's kind of bizarre. Where, if you invest your money in real estate, it's 10% rate of return a year. You invest your money, you're willing to put down $300 on a roulette spin. Incredibly, you could get 2 to 1 in a minute. That is whoa. That is not crazy to do that. That is very interesting that could be done. Now, obviously, it's a bit of a trap. In other words, in principle, if there wasn't any house take at all, it'd be like, well, what's the problem? And the answer is, well, there kind of isn't a problem, because that's what life is effectively that. The problem becomes how expensive it gets and how deceptive it is about you paying the price. Gambling people that have set it up, they have to make fees for going to all the trouble and the entrepreneurial risk. So it's legitimate. They either have real estate or they have complicated business models. They have all kinds of stuff that they have to do. So there's going to be fees associated with this that wouldn't be there in the Stone Age, but on the other hand, you're given opportunities that you wouldn't be given in the Stone Age. So really, when people ask this question, it's like, are there underlying things that are sort of causing this pathological condition? It's like, no, not really. It's a good question, and if you were to ask some Freudian psychoanalytic person, they'd say, oh yeah, well, the Oedipal stage of development, he had issues with his father, blah, blah. So it's all BS. The truth is, this is an alluring, shiny object out on the Kalahari. It's like, wow, I can go 2 to 1 in 30 seconds, and all I have to do is be willing to gamble some of my earnings from yesterday. Why the hell wouldn't I? And the answer is, that's what that is. The fact that it's not easy to do well, or that it could be painful, that is something that most people learn, and they're therefore limited to sort of entertaining excitement. But when it's worse than that, it's because we've got a personality that is a high dopamine signaler that is seeing near victory as success, and we got a trap, and those people need help. Yeah. Great question.
Yeah.
We came from tribes. Do people look for the feeling of being in a community in other ways? Yes, being a vegan community, etc. Religion used to give this feeling, but nowadays a lot of people are atheists, so they look for this feeling somewhere else. Definitely. So the question is, do people have a native desire to have connection and community? And the answer is absolutely. And so that's one of the problems in modern life, and one of the great gifts. So one of the great gifts is that instead of being stuck with the 36 people in your tribe, and it turns out that you're kind of an outlier, you've got a lot of kind of bizarre personality characteristics that make you super interesting, but the truth is everybody around you is dull as dirt, and you want to get the hell out of there. There's nowhere to go. You're stuck. You're going to live your life there, and that's how it's going to be, and that there will be an unrealized potential to what your life could have been had you had bigger and wider opportunity. So the modern environment is incredible, but it also comes with prices. And one of those prices is that we've fractured the village, and everybody now lives in their own little, basically cubicles, and they don't have a village. And so they certainly I hope that people have some semblance of villages. So some people go to a workplace that they like, and they've got a camaraderie there. That's a good thing. Some people have a bowling team that they go and they bowl every week, and they're actually good buddies, and they've been doing it for 20 years. You hope that people have friends that they either make friends at school, or they were connected to a church or some organization or some hobby that they really like to do. We hope that that's true. But it's very often the case that people are, in fact, tribe deficient, and that's sort of an echo. It's a shadow of our forgotten ancestors that are basically saying this is something missing, and there's no obvious way to necessarily fix it. Long-term deep connections don't come from just going hanging out with some people at a bar and talking to them. Deep connections are forged through very important trials by fire in people's lives, where they test each other's mettle and they test each other's solidarity, and they learn about each other's personality under stress, and people win esteem in those processes. And that esteem and the feeling of that esteem being connected, that's a super big deal. And so, yeah, that's something that's missing, and people are often searching for it. Sometimes they won't get, sometimes a little bit is all somebody needs. Okay, so sometimes people need a lot more, but that is definitely, one of the costs that has come with our modern magnificent civilization.
Yeah, I have kind of questions related to that.
Yes.
A little bit. With us living in this modern time, one of the most the most comfortable time to be a human, I guess, in history ever, really.
Yeah.
Does this kind of make people want to look for communities in different ways, or look to be oppressed in ways that where people aren't kind of oppressed the same way as they used to be? I kind of worded that badly, but how is it different these days compared to back then in terms of someone mentioned a vegan community. There's very much a cult vibe. You can talk about the
yes,
kind of the trans community and other things like that.
Yeah.
This is things that you didn't even see 40 years ago, let alone kind of hundreds of years ago. So how has this changed?
I don't know. I'm not quite exactly sure what your question is, but a bigger answer to your question is that the way we live is a long ways from the Kalahari, and you're going to find things that are incredible about the Kalahari, and you're going to find things amazing about the modern environment. And the way we live now has been mutated almost beyond all recognition. But here's some super interesting things to think about if you're to go back there, because if you go back there today, those people are still there. They've never left, and you're talking about the original human DNA is still living. And they're still living the same way that they were living 100,000 years ago before anybody ever left Africa. So what you're going to find is number one, nobody's lonely. That's out. That doesn't exist. Nobody doesn't have friends. That's out. There's no police force because it's a self-policing process. You're going to find that nobody feels like their work isn't valuable or meaningful. Everybody's work is valuable and meaningful. Pretty much nobody's unmated, because the truth is that it's such a small competitive pool, and there's a process, and frickin' everybody's shacked up. And there's musical chairs when people break up and that sort of thing. But nobody's out there lonely by themselves, you know what I mean? That's not happening. And some other things are that there's a sense of being part of something that's important, that you are important. You're not if you drop off the face of the earth, it's not like nobody notices. People notice, and it's a big deal. And nobody goes to their grave never having danced, never having tried to tell jokes, not given speeches, not doing poetry, not carving, not painting. They do it all. The arts are an unbelievably important part of human nature. This has been completely unexplored and not understood by the world's psychology of the 20th century, that this is endemic in our DNA, is to be artists. That's what I told this guy something about himself, and he didn't quite know it. He didn't even have the words for it. And I said, you're an artist. That's what that is. That's what drives you to do many of the things. It's a way you're trying to bring messages to people. It's actually a lot through metaphor.
It's been quite liberating to embrace art, and I was very shy to be an artist before, shy to do all sorts of things. So I was quite like scared of like people's opinions and stuff. But I think one experience that was super liberating was when Sticky Hand gave me some incredibly potent drugs, and I was in a quite a deep temporary psychosis, and I was in an extremely open state, and I went kind of full schizo mode, and a part of my process why I did some of like super insane shit like a year and a half ago in like public was a part of my thought process was that I wanted to intentionally do incredibly cringe things and things that are like I sort of intentionally went full like embarrassment mode. The emperor took off his clothes and went to run in front of the entire village, and I kind of intentionally humiliated myself in such a way that I can say that there is the meme with the cow that says that I am cringe but I am free, and it's quite liberating.
Yeah, it's actually fascinating. You know, I've seen that pattern before. So I've had people that were under a lot of stress with a lot of expectations and a lot of pressure, and they do something to crash the car. They're just like, you know what, I'm gonna just go haywire, and we're gonna reset the whole table. Is kind of what is a deep motivation there. I forget where I was going. I was blabbering about something.
No,
that's
you
a
can't.
loss.
My point.
Oh yeah, but the point is, another thing, you won't see any drug addicts on the Kalahari. So you won't see anybody struggling with their weight on the Kalahari. Everybody's in spectacular physical condition. Everybody is connected to family. Everybody's connected to their best friends. Everybody goes to work every day. Everybody basically participates and contributes. And when they go to their grave, they did their best to sing, dance, tell stories, be wise, be helpful. They tried to earn esteem in every way that a human being is designed to earn esteem, and they gave it their very best. Okay, and so I have had so many clients. I don't know how many, but many thousands over the last 40 years. And one of the things is somebody asked a question about regret, and I've had people that regretted that they were held back by their own too high of expectations and embarrassment because they weren't being encouraged by a tribe to do things that were important to them, for example, artistically, whether it was painting or whether it was acting or whether it was singing, dance, all these things. And they're 60 years old, and they're like, my life feels empty. I have not done this, and then I dig harder, and it turns out there were dreams in there that never got realized. And I see that this is actually, not only that, a huge thing is people are disconnected to deep community. They've got a few friends, sort of, but it's like, no, they're not connected in the way that human beings were designed to be connected. So this is why I try to use this vision, and I didn't invent it. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, but as we bounce our perspective back between the Kalahari and the modern environment, we see fantastic things here, and we see things we left behind that we weren't even aware we left behind. And so part of what I try to do with any people that I work with in any forum, whether it's a company like this or whether or not it's individuals, wherever we're working, we're trying to figure out what part of your nature has been left behind. What's missing, basically, from your emotional diet, and that's what we want to put. That's what we want to put in there, because that's probably what's going to give us the best satisfaction.
And these Kalahari, that kind of type people that are living this very basic life even today, are they more fulfilled than people that are kind of the West that are sucked into social media and have all this anxiety constantly running through your head? Are they more fulfilled as people living in their tribes, living basically because it's more fundamentally human?
There's interesting things, because you ask a great question. The answer is, I would say generally yes. Another thing that they don't have is they don't have material envy. Everybody's living in the same standard of living, so there's no such thing as poverty. This is how we live. People don't stay in 30-year marriages where they're not interested. In other words, that isn't design. That's not part of the design. If it's like, hey, if this thing isn't working 7 years later, we say goodbye, and it's not a catastrophe. So that's because there isn't a divorce and lawyers and money on the line. It's like, no, this is just what makes us happy, okay? So in many ways it's better off, but I can tell you they also live with some problems that we don't have. somebody gets sick and there's no doctor, okay? And it's like they might have a lot of life left on the tires. They might be 42 years old, but there's no way to save them, and you lose a magnificent human and a magnificent life, and it could have been saved. Also, there's sudden tragedies. People freaking die in hunting accidents, or tragedy. A child dies, an anaconda takes your kid right out of the river. There are tragedies that take place often, which is just catastrophic. And one of the worst things that happens is when there's tribal warfare. Just like Monarch here never saw a war he didn't want to get in. This is not uncommon in dominant, testosteronized, young, tough males. They want it their way, and they want it this way, okay? And so when it gets dangerous, and it can get very dangerous pretty quickly, and one of the things that we find is that when tribal warfare breaks out, a lot of people are like really sweating it. You know what I mean? They understand that their life may be on the line, they understand that their honor may be on the line, and they can't back away, but they can feel the vacuum of effectively, if alpha doesn't pull us back from the edge here, if there's not a solution, what are we going to do? So it turns out that when the state has often come in to the villages and said, hey, well, now we're called Brazil, guys, in case you didn't know, okay? So yes, we're now back into your Amazon basin here, and I'm sorry, but this is how it's going to go down. But the good news is that you're not going to be engaged in tribal warfare with those people from the other side of the river the way you've been for the last 4 years and wiping everybody out. And the relief is tremendous. It's like, oh, there's a Leviathan that's going to sit on the top of this thing and spare us from this disaster. So all that, my mind just swirls around all the time with every individual in every situation, where can we make things better off, and are we worse off, and what's missing from the piece of human nature that we need to put in. So that's the story, and that goes all the way down through some specific individual and their relationship to gambling.
I'll be religious. What's your short answer to this?
Me?
Yeah.
Just put me on the spot for God and everybody. I'm not religious. It's always a good idea to do a caveat at the end of that with a nice long trail on it, which is that religion isn't one thing. It's actually a montage of a whole bunch of different things. It's a conglomeration of things. And one of the facets of religion that is core to human nature is actually basically ethical systems. And so I was born with that. And I was also born with many of the feelings that are effectively religious feelings that inherently come with that. And so it's in me. It's part of who it is that I am. But do I personally think that there's a deity that's paying attention to anything, or that there's a system no, I don't. But are the evolutionary substrates to be religious, are they part of human nature? And the answer is absolutely they are part of human nature. And are those substrates part of me? And the answer is absolutely they're part of me. And so I've been many places. I've been in many great cathedrals. I've heard the music, and I have those feelings, okay? And you can evoke those feelings in me. One of the most effective times they were ever invoked was watching a movie called Field of Dreams. It's a classic with Kevin Costner that's worth watching if anybody's never watched it. It's a great movie. And it's religious. And it's... Magnificent Obsession by Lloyd Douglas was a great novel that moved me when I was a teenager. And so it's in there. It's part of, I can even feel it now. In other words, even talking about it. So I have a reverence for that part of human beings and their nature, and a reverence of how it weaves into the importance of tribe and the importance of being a good human. All of that is deep in religion. The specific part of religion that everybody wants to know about is, do you believe in a deity or don't you believe in a deity? And it's like that is oversimplifying the entire issue. And so for me specifically, I don't. But I don't look down on anybody that thinks differently than I do. I believe I understand why they have. I think it's native to the species that this is, people that are smarter than me that I have talked to, believe. You know what I mean? And it is an innate feeling, and so I have complete and total respect for that. Unlike I won't call him a colleague, but he almost is, Richard Dawkins. So Richard Dawkins is a brilliant guy, and I've learned a tremendous amount from Richard Dawkins. But I don't respect his distaste and disgust for religious thought, feeling, and etc. That's not in me to feel that way, and I look and feel at it from a different perspective, and that's who I am.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So this leads into I'm just trying to understand the nature of reality, and I cannot get this thought out of my head. That's been there. I remember since I was like 14 or so, I've been actively thinking about this, and going deeper and deeper into this theory. And also my most intelligent friends, Rui, is also fully convinced about this. But I believe that it's quite plausible that we live in some sort of a simulation, and I think that the nature of the simulation would be as such that it's the consciousness effectively generates the reality in real time, and I think it's a quite a common theory. Many people think the same, but I feel like I've seen too much too much evidence about it to not believe it, and I wanted to ask you for a while. I don't know if I ever spoke anything about this, but would like to hear some thoughts on this.
Yeah, you and some of my brilliant friends think this way, and this is deep into, it's a neuroscientist down in Irvine, Don Hoffman. There's these guys. This is all super interesting, and they can even make compelling cases that are intriguing as hell. I'm not that open-minded, so you're going to find that it's very bright, open-minded people will find their way there. I'm going to look at that and point and say, you're too open-minded, okay? And they're going to point at me and say, you're not open-minded enough. And, that's where we're going to live. Yeah, I think that's what I feel about it. I'm just far too unopen-minded. I'm too in the middle of the bell curve to see it, unless somebody hits me over the head with it.
Yeah, I just can't see like how I can't find a way to close my mind enough to like not see this. I just think it's such a plausible theory.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's one thing that it's like it's impossible to prove wrong or prove
Mm-hmm.
right. It's kind of paradoxical.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just basically the step one or the step zero here is that when consciousness appears, if you think about like just you have a black box or you have nothing, and if somehow you get consciousness that comes out of somewhere, what the consciousness is going to do next is it's going to start rationalizing the reality. And I think from this like hypothetical black box, when you just insert consciousness in there, what's going to happen next is the consciousness will ask, why is this, what is this, and it's effectively going to start like hallucinating and start building. It's going to start the project, it's going to start building the reality. The black box suddenly, it's going to be colorful and it's going to expand and expand. And I think that the nature of reality is that, like according to this theory, is that the reality is constantly trying to justify itself to your consciousness, and I think that the things that are happening in this university and this reality, many things really like intuitively they don't make much sense at first, but whatever thing you investigate, when you look deeper into some things that don't make sense, the reality, your consciousness will create a reality where it's gonna find like a justification to this. Like I'm expecting next, since you are the smart scientist, you will probably find some kind of an explanation for me that will convince why, actually there's a logical reason why the reality is as it is, and blah blah blah, and it will just go on an endless, infinite loop of just justifying itself.
All I can say to that is God only knows. That's where we are. All right. Getting dark, guys. How do we feel?
Yeah, Vesta, do you want to turn the light on?